Okay, so this last section on social media and interpersonal communication. For this one, you guys are going to know more than I because I just don't use social media much at all. And also, I apologize, my allergies are kicking in right now for some strange reason. Okay, so when social media was new, there were a lot of people who felt that this was it. This was the end of communication as we knew it. And then the pendulum swung all the way to the other extreme, saying this is the best thing that could happen to communication. And now I think we're somewhere in the middle. And as I said, this is the topic of the first discussion posts, and I'm curious what your thoughts are on social media and its place in society right now. So basically, we think about social media as the technology that allows people to start relationships and to maintain relationships. And what do we mean by social media? Sometimes I might refer to it as mediated communication, and by this I don't mean it has nothing to do with uh, going to family counseling where someone is mediating between the two. It just means mediated communication or social media is communication channels that allow community-based input. So it's not just you on the telephone with someone. Interactions from the other person, content sharing, and collaboration. So on page 24, there is the assessment that asks you to look at your use of social media, and I do want you to do that. And you probably have an intuitive sense, but be more deliberate about it and see what you come up with. There's also a very um, interesting chart on page 25 that looks at the difference between various channels, and it is rating them, comparing them based on these three aspects of the characteristics of media communication: leanness, asynchronicity, and permanence. Leanness has to do with a message is lean when there are only the words. You have no nonverbals. So they say, then they give you the example for something that's lean. Emailing, texting, writing a letter, those are all relatively lean because you have the words. Yeah, you have emojis, but I don't know, it's not always enough. A little less lean is a phone call because your voice is there and you can use tone of voice. Slightly more towards the rich end would be a video conference. And I got to tell you, after half a semester of having at least 3 video conferences a week, I am so done with video conferencing. Anyways, the richest form of communication is face-to-face interactions because it's got your words, it's got your tone of voice, it's got your facial expressions, it's got how far apart you're standing. Well, this is all stuff we'll talk about in chapter 6. Okay, asynchronicity. So synchronicity means at the same time, and asynchronicity means it does not have to be at the same time. So if you look at the chart on page 25, they say face-to-face, it's got to be synchronous. You're talking to someone and they're not there. You're just weird. You have imaginary friends. Something like voicemail is asynchronous. I mean, that's why you're leaving a message, because the other person is not there. And then permanence is the one that is highly permanent is email and anything that you do on social networking sites. Okay, so these are the characteristics of social media. This was interesting. Now I don't exactly understand Snapchat. I used to confuse it with Instagram, I think because the two sounded kind of similar. But if we're thinking about permanence, Facebook is relatively permanent. Twitter is relatively permanent, but Snapchat is the opposite of that. It's ephemeral. It only lasts for a short time. So it is viewed by people as a lightweight channel. Okay. And people tend to use it to share spontaneous experiences. And people say this it's a lot of fun to use. It when people use Snapchat, they think they use it because they're feeling positive, and if they use it, they tend to feel more positive. It's really enjoyable. However, another study found that people were more likely to use Snapchat to flirt, and that had a tendency to make their current partner jealous. I wonder why. And that, let's see, what was it? Half the respondents said they had sent drunk photos via Snapchat, and between 13 and 20% admitted sending snaps involving sexting or legally questionable activities. So the idea that these messages don't last very long, they're not permanent, lets people be a little bit more disinhibited. And I will talk about that concept in a minute or two. Okay, because that's another important aspect. Okay, so let's take a look at the pros and cons, the theoretical pros and cons of social media and relational quality. And this is something that I've asked you to think about or write about in your discussion. All right. Two schools of thought. Social media is inferior. Why? It lacks richness. I mean, I have a Bitmoji, and that Bitmoji can ride a unicorn, and I don't know. What else have I had my Bitmoji do? Lie on the floor saying I can't even, all kinds of stuff. So there's a little bit of richness there, but doesn't have tone of voice. Okay. It can discourage community, which is weird because it came out a little loud. That's strange because they say that social media is designed for community building, but let's see. The problem, I think, is that it can discourage community because it's easier to exclude someone when you're not seeing them face to face. It can, if you look at this picture, you see a bunch of people standing next to each other and no one is looking at each other. They're all on their phones. And this has always baffled me, that when I would walk up to the classroom and people would be waiting outside and everyone's on their phone, and I would say to them, guys, you're in interpersonal communication. Why aren't you talking to the people that you're near? You're not interpersonally communicating here. Okay. And as I talked about with Snapchat, it can be superficial. You might be posting stuff that, it's not important. Okay. On the other side, it can be very rich and satisfying because there are, as I said, there are the emojis, there are Bitmojis, there's all kinds of stuff that you can use, GIFs. Okay. It can also increase the amount and quality of interpersonal communication. And they said why? Because it's definitely less complicated. You pick up your phone, you text a few things. You don't have to drive across town to find someone. And I would argue, in these days of social distancing and sheltering at home, how else could you keep in contact with people? How many of you actually picked up the phone and called? I know that there seems to be almost a phone phobia for a lot of younger people. They just don't want to use that phone for that purpose. Okay, I'm just curious where you fall on this continuum, that social media helps relational quality or social media has hindered. And it's probably not an all or nothing, but I would encourage you to think of examples where you felt it has helped and where it has hindered. Okay, so I love the cartoon here, the dog collar. It keeps me from looking at my phone every 2 seconds. I like to ask people, what's the longest you've ever gone without looking at your phone? And I remember somebody said 2 weeks. And we asked how she was able to go that long. She said she lost her phone. So, okay. Anyways, here are 5 suggestions for how you can communicate competently with social media. I'm going to guess that none of these are new, but let me know. Okay. Be careful of what you post. Okay. How many of you have typed something quickly and sent it and then said, oops, shouldn't have posted that? I have a story about that. I had gone to a colleague's wedding. It was on a Sunday, and another colleague and I were driving back, and she said, Marguerite, go home, take the day off, do not do any more work. And I said, yeah, sure. So I went home, and of course I opened my email, and a guy, a man, older gentleman, had sent an email to her and to me. Her last name was Mahmoud. My last name is Yawin, and the email said, Dear Professor Manhood and Yawning. And then he mentioned somebody else, and I think it was autocorrect, messed up everything. And so I forward the email to my friend Carol, and I say, can you believe this guy wants us to hire him, and he didn't get any of our names right? Well, I didn't actually forward it to Carol. I hit respond or reply. So I should have really been a lot more careful before I hit that send button, because once it's been sent, you can't. I mean, I have gotten messages in my email where it says, Jane Doe wants to recall the message, but it's too late. I already read it. Okay, so there's that issue of permanence. Okay, the next point, be considerate. I would say any of you, and I have no idea how old you are, but if you are dealing with someone of your parents' generation, for sure, they really want your undivided attention. It frustrates me when my children, who are young adults, we're talking and they're on their phone at the same time. And my daughter always says, oh, I'm paying attention to you. I don't know. I think my belief is when you are with someone, they are deserving of your attention as you are deserving of their attention, and you shouldn't split your attention. Unless you're saying, look, I'm sorry, Mom, this is a really important message. I need to answer it, and then I'll get back to our conversation. But I don't know, she's looking at stuff about Harry Styles, formerly of One Direction. Anyways, keep your tone civil when you are interacting with people on social media. Don't be rude. It's a lot easier to be rude when you don't see the person, I think. All right. Be mindful of bystanders. My brother always said he wanted to, be walking around, again, when we were out in public much more. He wanted to walk through the grocery store and say, yeah, the doctor says, he'd be on his phone. Only not really. He'd be faking he was on his phone saying, yeah, the doctor said I'm contagious, but I figure, what the heck, what does he know? Okay, just to see what kind of a reaction he would get out of the bystander. Sometimes a conversation, it becomes almost this mass personal. You are having a private conversation, but you are sharing it with the multitudes. Okay. I'm sorry I cut off the E on the next one. I made the text a little too large. Would be a good idea to balance the time that you spend on social media and with face-to-face communication, because if you get out of balance, students have told me that they feel they have forgotten how to communicate with people face-to-face. So many students tell me they're just baffled by eye contact, like how much is enough, how much is too much, and if you're never practicing it, you're never going to get good at it. So if you spend too much time on social media, your face-to-face communication will suffer. Okay. And the last point in communicating competently with social media is to embrace multimodality. And multimodality is the ability and willingness to use multiple channels of communication. All right, so think about this. competent communication is being effective and appropriate. And so and to develop a repertoire of skills. So, I mean, and I let me finish this thought before I start my next one. To develop this repertoire of skills, you actually have to try different modalities. So this really ties to the balance. Don't just be face-to-face or nothing. You have to think about what is the best channel for me to use. And so I'm thinking, especially if I'm teaching interpersonal communication, it's not enough for me to say I don't really do social media. I at least need to get out there and practice and see what it's like. And maybe maybe I will fall in love with Snapchat. I don't think so, but you never know. Okay, so there was a point that I forgot to mention where Steve Jobs, at one point when they were talking about the fact that you could actually enhance relationships with social media, he suggested that the personal computer should be renamed the interpersonal computer, because that's what we're using it for. Okay, this was chapter 1. And it's 4 sections. And if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to post them in that first discussion. It can be a question that you want everyone in the class to think about. It can be something that's specifically for me. And if it's a little more private for me, just you can email me to my Tunxus email, or you can send me a message within the course. And on the course outline that's posted, I have listed my Google number. Feel free to text me. I love texting. That's probably the one social media that I really enjoy. Okay, we are done.